Americans are showing their support of the anti-government demonstrations in Cuba as the Cuban regime cracks down on protests and protesters. Many are asking, where's President Biden on this? The House of Representatives is moving ahead with a special committee hearing to look into the Capitol riot last January. Are they really after the truth? In a few minutes, we'll talk with attorney and Victory News contributor John Graves. And Arizona State Senate will have a hearing today about the results of the Maricopa County election audit. Victory News is at the state capitol, and a little later, we'll bring our own Tim Fox in with the latest that's happening there. First, let's go to Mike Garofalo with today's top stories. Mike.
Let's talk about what's happening out of Florida. Governor Ron DeSantis held a roundtable discussion on Tuesday about the unrest in Cuba over the weekend. Here is some of what the governor had to say.
And I think everyone here is of an agreement over some fundamental truths. One of those truths is that the people who are out in the streets revolting are not complaining about a lack of vaccine or for some tangential issue. They are revolting against a corrupt communist dictatorship that has ruled that island with an iron fist for over 60 years, that is responsible for death and destruction, not just on the island of Cuba, but really throughout the Western Hemisphere with their actions supporting other Marxist regimes. These are people that fundamentally desire a fresh start, and they desire a free society. And so when you're in the State Department or you're in some of these positions and you're going to act like this is something, well, maybe the regime can just provide a little bit of an accommodation here or an accommodation there. That's a fundamental misreading of what's going on in Cuba, and it's not something that's going to lead to them, the people of Cuba, realizing their aspirations.
The governor also called out U.S. businesses that might be able to provide internet access to the Cuban people after their government shut down theirs.
What does the regime do when you start to see these images? They shut down the internet. They don't want the truth to be out. They don't want people to be able to communicate. And so one of the things I think we should be able to do with our private companies or with the United States is to provide some of that internet service via satellite. We have companies on the Space Coast that launch these things. So that's going to be some calls I'm going to make to see what are the options from some Florida companies to be able to do it.
Miami's Little Havana neighborhood was the scene of another rally by people showing their support for anti-government demonstrations there in Cuba. People with Cuban and American flags gathered Wednesday afternoon and braved a storm before the rally began. South Florida is home to the largest U.S. population of Cuban Americans. And the Biden administration's supposed desire to monitor private text messages for COVID-19 vaccine disinformation that is not sitting well with many. Now, one of those is Missouri Senator Josh Hawley, a Republican. Here is what he had to say on Fox News about this on Wednesday.
Sounds like something out of Beijing. I mean, we know that the Communist Chinese Party has built this surveillance state, and now it sounds like Joe Biden wants to bring that to the United States of America. I mean, getting into our phones now, it's bad enough that they use social media to censor us, to spy on us, to shut down speech, but now private text messages? I mean, what's going to happen next? Are they going to take away our phones? Are they going to tell Verizon or AT&T or whomever to shut down people's cell service if they text things that the government doesn't like? This is insane. It is un-American. It's probably unconstitutional.
A former Trump administration official is accusing Joe Biden of pouring gasoline on the fire after the president gave this speech about election reform.
Neither cause nor evidence was found to undermine the national achievement of administering the historic election in the face of such extraordinary challenges. Audits, recounts were conducted. In Arizona and Wisconsin, in Georgia, it was recounted 3 times. It's clear. For those who challenge the results and question the integrity of the election, no other election has ever been held under such scrutiny and such high standards. The big lie is just that, a big lie.
Now, following that speech, Former Virginia Attorney General Ken Cuccinelli accused Biden of pouring gasoline on that fire, saying that he's dividing us further and he undermines the credibility of those advocating for a federal takeover of elections. Cuccinelli made his comments ahead of his testimony yesterday in a hearing on voting rights before the Constitution Subcommittee of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Greg, I'm going to send it back to you.
Thanks, Mike. We're expecting some potentially big news today in Arizona, where the state Senate will be holding a hearing on some of the findings of their election audit. Victory News is there. We reported earlier this week that the numbers from the audit in Maricopa County reportedly don't mesh with the numbers that were certified during the 2020 election. But what does that actually mean? I want to bring in attorney and Victory News contributor John Graves. John, a lot happening right now around the world, and especially in Arizona here in the United States. Your thoughts?
It really is, and what strikes me about all those stories is the underlying theme. So you got protests in Cuba, and what happens with a communist Marxist country? They shut the entire internet down. What's happening in America? We're trying to turn it in on the left to Marxist, and we're not shutting the whole internet down. We're only shutting conservatives or Christians down. We're monitoring their text. We're deplatforming the sitting president of the United States. We don't agree with him. And so a lot of similarities there. And how do communist powers come to be? Because of voter integrity issues and voter fraud and illegal. They don't allow free elections. And so if Joe Biden thinks it's a big lie to do it, why is he doubling the staff of the DOJ and trying to stop the audit in Arizona and trying to sue Georgia for voter integrity that 85% of America agrees with? You have to ask yourself, is this not a new version of TDS, Trump derangement syndrome? Maybe it's voter trafficking derangement syndrome. They don't want to talk about it, but the truth will come out, and I think you're going to see some of that start in Arizona, and the dominoes will begin to fall.
It's very interesting to listen to their words and see what they compare. Our very first story, we talked about the Capitol Democrats now investigating January 6th. Victory News was there. Tim Fox was there. And he said it's not been anything. They compared it to 9/11. Now they compare it to the Civil War. And they've done the same thing with the Texas election law. There's some inconvenient facts here. The Weather Underground bombed the Capitol building in I believe it was 1970s or 1980s. War of 1812, the Capitol building was burned. I mean, you have several things that are bigger than or as big as January 6th, yet he compares it to 9/11 and the Civil War. John?
That's exactly right. And why do they do that? The first line of defense is using language. Satan did this in the garden. He did this when he attacked Jesus. You try to deceive people with language. You try to deceive people with words so they can't clearly see the truth. So they say, oh, this is as bad as 9/11. Look at the facts. Thousands of people died in 9/11. One person was shot by a Capitol police officer. 4 people were by either drugs or stroke or something totally unrelated. They didn't come there with arms to destroy the Capitol. That's the story that's being told. And so what do? They have to go back to 9/11, go back to Civil War, where there really was a serious conflict that led to blood and destruction, and try to pretend like this is what's happened here in order to create fear and justify silencing our voices.
A few facts that are inconvenient for that party is Preston Brooks beat an abolitionist senator, a co-worker. He was a senator from South Carolina, I believe, and he almost beat him to death. He was a Democrat. First black congressman, 1870. His name was Hiram Rhodes Revels. He was a Republican, and the Democrats tried to block him being seated. There's a history here. And that's what I keep trying to point out. The Civil War, 2% of all the American population died in that event. To make it about states' voting rights and all the things, to use those analogies, I think is reckless by the president. Last thought before I go to Mike.
It really is. And here's the bottom line. Do you want free and fair elections? Every side should want an audit. If you think it's a big lie, then let the audits go on and let them be real audits. Most of what is being called audits are just surface versions so you can act like there is and move on down the road, which is why not a lot of people are there with Tim right now. But I promise you, keep praying for the truth. The truth comes out. God eventually wins, even if it looks difficult for a season for us.